riots which started in London and spread across major cities back in August didn't come as a surprise to you?
Oh, well, absolutely not. And it was very easy to see within a few hours, but certainly within 24 hours, that these were not spontaneous riots from people who'd had enough. It just didn't stack up. We know how difficult it is to organise people across the country, and here we have the British government saying that riots were being organised in not only London but other cities across UK, that these riots were being organised by young black teenagers using BlackBerry phones. This is absolute nonsense. What was actually happening was the violence was being created by government agitators. And we also know from residents in some of the areas where the riots took place that they watched police deliberately held back so that they didn't intervene, and the thing then grew. The trouble on the streets grew. So somebody was ordering the police, let's stand back, let's allow this thing to grow, let's kick it off. And we've got better information than that, because some British policemen, and these are brilliant people because they're so brave, they have actually been leaking information that when they were taken into an area where the rioting had started, they saw other so-called police units who they didn't recognise. They had no idea what units these really were. They had no idea where the people had come from. And in many cases, they were talking about so-called policemen who didn't have any formal number or name identity on them. So we have British policemen who are themselves now starting to blow the whistle on the fact that when there is trouble on the streets, there are agitators who are being moved into position, via our own policing system. So this is very, very dangerous, because we have now got government-backed agitation. And if listeners are thinking, where do they want to take this, I'll give my opinion. So this is just Brian Gerrish's opinion on this one. They want absolute major violence on the streets of Britain, because if they can create that major violence, they will bring in the Civil Contingencies Act, which is roughly equivalent to the American Patriot Act. The moment the Civil Contingencies Act is in place, we are living in a dictatorship. So whenever we're giving talks as the UK column or the British Constitution Group, we're constantly warning that we need people to be peaceful. We don't need fights between blacks and whites or Muslims or Christians, whatever the groups are. If we fight amongst ourselves, the criminals who are in power in the Senate in America and Congress and in Westminster in Britain, those criminals win. We've got to be smarter than violence at the moment. We've got to keep it calm and peaceful, and we've got to get the truth out about how our countries are being destroyed from the inside.
And I mean, just to back you up, we actually did a story in regard to the riots where Twitter users were reporting that men claiming to represent the media were actually driving around the streets and paying them to riot, paying them to break shop windows, as he said, paying them to become agitators. So, I mean, those riots, obviously, after it went on the social meme and it was on the news every night, you had copycats going out and doing the same thing. But the genesis of those riots, as you said, was definitely provocateur in many ways. Extrapolating this out, just about the general state of Britain, Brian, perhaps the best way to frame that is to ask, what do groups like Common Purpose want to turn Britain into, and how far have they got down that path?
Well, very simply, Common Purpose wants to create a new society. It doesn't ever define the society properly, because this is how the con works. If you said to people, join Common Purpose, and we are working to overturn present society and we want to create a new society that's going to be governed by a political elite, most people would run away. So what Common Purpose is doing is being very, very devious. It's sucking people into courses where it's giving them an education to impose this new ideology on them. And we know how it is being done, and I really would ask listeners to go away and research this for themselves. The way they are doing it is to use NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. This is a form, technically it's a form of hypnosis, but these are very, very, very sophisticated techniques of messing around with people's minds. And although NLP can be used to help people, it can be used in therapeutic ways, what we are seeing is NLP being used to promote a very dangerous political agenda, and it's being used to change people's views and values without them actually being aware of it. Now, if you say to me, how bad has it got, I'm going to be able to say with total confidence, because the UK column has published this stuff in detail, we've now got Common Purpose embedded at the highest level of government. One of Cameron's ministers who's helping promote it is Oliver Letwin, who I'll say just happens to be an ex-MN Rothschild man. But we've got Common Purpose, which is a political charity. I know that I've already said earlier that it's not possible to be political, but I'm sure they are. They are now bedded straight into the government cabinet office, and they have been put under contract to help set up behavioural change units in every government department. Now, this is not fantasy, this is fact. We've got the documents, we know the names, we know when the meetings took place. So in the UK at the moment, every key government department has a cell which is tasked, first of all, with changing the views and values and behaviour of the government department people. And when they've achieved that, the departments are going to use the same effects on us to change our views and values in society. Now, the government's own documents, and I'll quote one of them, which is called Mindspace. Mindspace, you can find it on Google. In that document, it actually admits that the psychological processes they're using, the NLP they're using, can change our views and values and beliefs. We may not even know that those things have been changed. These modern applied psychology tools are so powerful we can have our views changed. We're not even aware the views changed. Alternatively, we might realise we're changed, we're doing different things, but we don't know how it was done to us. Now, that's not Brian Gerrish telling the audience that. That has come straight out of government documents. So let's start to put this together. We've got in Britain, and the same thing's happening in America, we have international criminals who have now wormed their way. We've been stupid enough to elect them, but they're now in positions of power in government. They're linked to arms dealers. They're calling for wars throughout the world. And these people are prepared to use applied psychology on their own citizens in order to get their agenda through. This is very, very dangerous stuff, and we've got to take the lid off it.
And I mean, NLP, which you were talking about before, goes right to the heart of what you just said. It's about manipulating behaviour. It's about certain phrases and emphasis on words. And this is used in advertising, it's used in speeches, it's used in politics. And it's about trying to get people to do what you want them to do, get them to think what you want them to think by the words that you use. I mean, it's sold as a self-help tool, and I'm sure a lot of people do use it for that, but it's been hijacked and it's now being used for nefarious ends.
Paul, can can I? Sorry to cut
go
in,
ahead.
but if I may, because I'm watching the time. Something I'd like to bring to the attention of the American audience is that in South Wales, being obviously part of the United Kingdom, over the last 2 years, in a very small geographic area, we now have over 40 teenagers, very young teenagers, and young people committing suicide. It's been going on for 2 years. The suicides are still continuing. And what is so terrible is these are children aged 14, 15, 16, and up through to sort of young 20s. And the method of suicide is that they are all hanging themselves. Now, this is not a very nice topic, but we're in very dangerous times at the moment. When we look at the suicides and we see they're all hanging themselves, this is unusual, because the facts are, statistically, that boys normally hang themselves or men hang themselves, whereas girls and women take drugs and maybe cut their wrists. But these people are all hanging themselves. Now, at the moment, the British government has put a media clampdown on these suicides because they do not want people in Britain to realise that something very, very nasty is happening with young people. But when we dig into what is actually happening in this area of South Wales, we find there is a massive infiltration of not only Common Purpose, but other organisations which are using applied NLP within the school system. Now, I can speak with confidence on this because we actually now have NLP trainers, people who are professional trainers in NLP. They have come forward to us to give us information because they are absolutely horrified that what they regard as a therapeutic skill is being unleashed on children in a political sense. Now, what one of these professional NLP people explained to me, and I think it's a very, very good analogy, if you buy yourself a new computer, and it's a very fast machine and you're very pleased with it, this is like the human brain. It's working well. And then you add a program, and everything's fine, and you add a few more programs, and then you fancy a game, and you add a couple of computer games. And after you've added so many things into your computer, eventually you get the odd problem. It freezes or it stops. And if you really overload it with lots of little screensavers and games and programs, eventually you can have major problems with your computer until you get it cleaned out. Now, what the NLP trainer explained to me is that if you start to put in NLP clips, NLP programs, into the minds of children and young people, you do a bit in this lesson, a bit in that lesson, a bit in next year's lesson, eventually you get problems. And his view, and I think he's absolutely correct, is that we are now starting to see the political pushing of applied behavioural psychology. This is now starting to result in our young people committing suicide. This is very dangerous stuff, and exactly the same processes are being used in American schools.
And it's interesting you touch upon that subject because a couple of weeks ago I wrote an article about Demos, which of course is the think tank of which Cameron regularly gives speeches, so did Tony Blair, founded by Marxist Julia Middleton, who of course is majorly involved with Common Purpose, sits on their board. And there was a story recently about Demos sending their agents out to schools to basically train them how to judge sources. And of course, anything designated as a, quote, conspiracy theory, anything that